Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
The world isn't run by weapons anymore, or energy, or money. It's run by little ones and zeros, little bits of data. It's all just electrons.
TV,
Email,
Facebook,
YouTube,
satellite,
podcasts,
Google Books,
blogs,
radio,
MySpace.
Twitter.
Too much information.
There's a war out there, old friend. And it's not about who's got the most bullets. It's about who controls the information. What we see and hear, how we work, what we think. It's all about the information.
Too much information running through my brain. Too much information driving me insane.
How could there be too much information?
Isn't the world just a construction out of spam?
Our guest is David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous, The Power of the New Digital Disorder.
Too much information running through my brain.
Too much information. Coming up on Philosophy Talk.
After the news.
Welcome to Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything.
Accept your intelligence. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. We're coming to you from the studios of KALW San Francisco.
Continuing conversations that began at Philosopher's Corner on the Stanford campus.
Today, too much information.
Too much information for what, Ken?
Well, John, to answer that question, we need to go back in time. Some of our listeners will be too young to remember, but once upon a time, a long, long time ago, if you wanted to find a book, you went to this place, a place called a library, and you searched using this ancient artifact, this thing called a card catalog. The card catalog gave you a number, a unique number assigned to that book.
I remember those days. I remember them very fondly. Sometimes when you got the catalog number and went there, the book wouldn't be there. Somebody checked it out or stolen it. But even then you could browse around for other things that you wanted. It was like being in a bookstore without the possibility of buying anything, because all you had to do was check it out. And all these books were arranged in a nice, tidy order, similar books next to each other on the library shelf. I loved whiling away the hours browsing through the library stacks like that.
You love that? Oh, I used to hate that. I mean, look, suppose you originally came looking for a book on, say, the U.S. Civil War, but you decided for some reason because of the project you were working on that you needed to browse through more widely. You needed to browse through all the books about any Civil War whatsoever, no matter when or where they happened. And maybe you wanted to learn about the role of these Civil Wars in reshaping subsequent philosophical thought, or you wanted to read novels about Civil Wars. What then, John? What then?
What then? Well, I would say see a shrink. I mean, for goodness sakes, who cares about that? But suppose some nutcase does want that. He wants to know, quote, everything having to do with some Civil War and other throughout history. I admit the old library catalog wouldn't be of much use.
It sure wouldn't. That's because the library didn't have any easy way to tell you what books it had about Civil Wars in general, their histories, their impacts, fiction about it. It just had no way to tell you that stuff.
And even if someone who had this peculiar desire did manage through a lot of catalog searching to generate a list of all the different books about all the different Civil Wars and their cultural and philosophical implications, he'd have to spend hours physically tracking down the books section by section, because they'd no doubt be spread all over the library.
You're exactly right. That's why I used to hate browsing in libraries. But so wouldn't it be infinitely better if the library could instantly recategorize and reshelf the books to suit your needs as a would-be browser at that very moment?
No, it wouldn't be infinitely better. It'd be infinitely worse, and it would raise a lot of dust. But you use the word browser, and that's a good choice of words, because that's the sort of thing that an internet browser does really well.
Exactly right. In the digital age, we can have multiple simultaneous, ever-shifting categories made up on the fly. And once all books, newspapers, magazines, you name it, once they all go fully digital, we won't even have to worry about how books are arranged on an actual physical shelf. We'll be able to rearrange the books on the virtual shelf in an instant to anyone's liking.
That sounds well and good. And as always, your enthusiasm for all things technological is almost infectious. But I have to admit, I really find something satisfying about the old days. Those old fixed categories and well-ordered shelves weren't just there because of the limits of the old technology. They represented somebody's best estimation of the proper divisions of human knowledge, Mr. Dewey or Mr. Library of Congress. They carried some weight because they were backed by authority, the authority of tradition. In the brave new digital world you love so much, where seemingly anything goes, where categories are made up on the fly and the virtual shelf, as you call it, can be arranged at the whim of a user, what separates the good from the bad, the wheat from the chaff, the silly from the serious?
Well, those are good questions, John, and I admit that maybe in the digital age we are at sea on a chaotic ocean of information.
Hence our topic, too much information.
Luckily, we don't have to try to navigate the sea alone. We've got the help of someone who has thought long and hard about these opportunities and challenges. That's David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous, The Power of the New Digital Disorder.
And of course, our listeners are invited to join in too. 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917.
But first, our roving philosophical reporter, April Dembosky, takes a look at this new digital disorder from the perspective of librarians and Wikipedians. She files this report.
These days, when we have a question, we simply type it into Wikipedia or Google and immediately get a tailored answer. That's not the way it used to be.
When somebody would call for a stock quote for the last 10 years, we used to have to pull 10 volumes of quarterly reports. Now you put in the stock and the time period that you want, and it's up on the screen in, less than a minute.
Kathy Lawhon has worked at the San Francisco Public Library for 28 years and is now the chief of the main library. She's witnessed the information revolution firsthand. I asked her if she thinks there is too much information.
Absolutely. It is overwhelming.
Then I asked Wikipedia spokesperson Jay Walsh the same thing.
Absolutely not. If it's a question of technology, there's lots of it. There's lots of space. So if the ceiling isn't there, then I say let's fill it up.
There is so much material, and if you don't have some way to categorize it in pretty much detail, you're going to lose it.
This is something the internet's not particularly good at, that notion of looking at a wall of information and sort of thinking about randomly just kind of going into it and seeing it. So libraries help me, at least personally, they help me visualize information. They help me think about it in ways that I can manage better than the vastness of the internet.
And that's why I think librarians will always be around and always be the keeper of information, because if we don't have a subject heading or a link to it, it's going to disappear.
But as we personalize our research, we can lose our curiosity.
The internet, like Wikipedia, is exactly what you want it to be. You get the experience that you want. If you're really only interested in NASCAR, you can avoid all the other information on the planet.
It's good and bad. I'm glad all that information is out there, but how do you filter it? I do think it's caused some problems politically, culturally. So I think we do have to continue to question what we read.
Hey, the internet probably functions like a library in that it's complex and that you have to be helped to find the right sources of information.
When internet users get confused by bad sources of information, they go to the library to sort things out.
Somebody will come in and say, well, I've been taking ginseng for, my eyes and nothing's happening. What should I be doing? And then the librarian finds something and says, well, you shouldn't be taking ginseng at all for this. We can't be experts in everything, but we can be experts in knowing what sources are the experts.
That doesn't always include Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think it's a mixed bag. It's open, it's nice, there's some good information, but it's a grain of salt too, I think.
We're still an encyclopedia. We're still a general knowledge resource. It's not perfect, but it's the biggest thing of its kind. The central feature for me is currency. It's so now. If it's a new thing like the bombings in Bombay a couple of months ago, there was an article created literally moments after it happened. Britannica can't really be in that space. The good news is, if there are millions of young people who are getting answers quickly, no, they're not getting the vast sort of world of information, but it certainly is probably opening the doors to deeper quests for knowledge and information. And that's where a library still plays a central role.
We're the gateway to honing down to what someone really might want.
There's no notion that I'm aware of empty libraries. I think they're still home ground. They're still headquarters and sort of the first space where you're among knowledge. And I think smart libraries, the ones that I've seen, bring in computers, but there's a great pedagogy around the technology.
I think the library has really been thoughtful in trying to keep the human touch, but also introducing some technology things. Our librarians are almost social workers in a lot of ways.
I love watching the shifting role of the library and how it grows and changes.
For Philosophy Talk, I'm April Demboski.
I'm John Perry. With me is Ken Taylor.
And our guest today is David Weinberger. He's a fellow at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, and he's author of Everything is Miscellaneous, The Power of the New Digital Disorder. David, welcome to Philosophy Talk.
Thanks.
David, I think of the miscellaneous as a sort of a catch-all, last-ditch category, the place where you put all the odds and ends that don't fit into any other category. So I'm a little puzzled. What makes you want to say everything is miscellaneous?
Because, in fact, everything is.
Well,
so,
okay.
yeah. So, what's the next question?
Why is everything
Dealt with that
miscellaneous?
rather well.
Why is everything miscellaneous? I mean, what do you mean by that?
Well, precisely because people tend to think of it, and it has in fact been the place, the catch-all place. And if your miscellaneous bin gets too big, then we declare the organizational scheme a failure and we redo it. And that's the way that we've had to organize the things of our world and our ideas about the world. It's actually quite remarkable that we've organized our ideas the same way that we've organized our physical objects, and so our ability to organize physical objects is so limited, and that's a huge limitation on how we've thought. So the idea behind saying everything is miscellaneous, which is not a very rigorous expression, I will admit, is to say that it is not the case that there is a single way of ordering the things in the world. There is not a single best way or most real way. There are only ways that depend upon our interests. That's how. And so we are better off if we are able to, as we are now, to put everything into a huge pile that allows us to sort and order dynamically based upon what we're interested in at the moment.
So that kind of explains the subtitle of your book, Digital Disorder, right? I mean, one might take that as two different ways. Disorder is something diseased, dysfunctionally, or broken. But I think you must mean it as disorder, as freeing ourselves from the old ossified order and replacing it with something that's disordered only in comparison with that old ossified thing. Do I have you right?
Not quite. Because the subtitle is, it's a commercial book, and the subtitle was meant to be catchy also. So it's not that we're replacing one order with another. I think what's happening digitally is that we're going from the idea that there needs to be a single order to the notion that things are best left sort of in a, let's say, pre-ordered state. Because we can now, at the moment, that depending upon our whim and our interest, we can reorganize and reorder and resort in meaningful ways instantly.
Right, and this is okay. So is this a good thing, a bad thing? I mean, the world is not organized whimsically, is it? The world comes in. There's animal, mineral, vegetable. There are living things, the non-living things. The living things are divided into the animal species and the plant species and the bacteria or whatever they are. I mean, the world has a hierarchical structure. So, doesn't it? Right? I mean, I learned that a long time ago at the foot of my first philosophy teachers. Aristotle's categories and all that stuff.
Well, yeah, sort of. And then the actual categories you gave were Linnaeus's.
Right, that's right.
Whose birthday was 300 years ago. And no, there is absolutely not a single order. You see this in the argument over whether Pluto is a planet. The short version of this is, if you're a scientist looking out across the heavens, you may be interested in any of many different things. You may be interested in studying weather, in which case you want to sort and order the world of the universe by objects that have atmospheres. But you may be interested in objects that in magnetism, and so you're interested in objects that have magnetic cores and so forth. So you can keep slicing and redicing this world any way you want along any of the attributes that we care about. There is no one single way of slicing and dicing that has preference over all others, except that that's what you're interested in now.
So the philosopher John Dupre has an example that I always liked, which is prickly pear. Prickly pear is a kind of a plant, but it's not a biological or botanical kind. It's a hiker's category, right? It puts together things from several different species because of their effect on your socks when you walk through them. So I'm behind you. Interest-driven categories are much richer than ones that are just handed to us by science. But does any interest define a category? I mean, things that are red and might love me. Is that a category?
Well, we're going to leave that question hanging, David, and you're going to take it up right after a break. You're listening to Philosophy Talk. Today we're discussing too much information with David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous.
When we look at the internet, is our newfound freedom for classifying, sorting, and manipulating information a blessing? Have we abandoned the tried and the true just for the new? Or does the new enable us to organize in categories the vast storehouse of human knowledge in more powerful ways? Join us at 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. Or you can email us at comments@philosophytalk.org.
The new information order, for better or for worse, plus your calls and emails when Philosophy Talk continues.
Look at that, the largest ball of twine is in Darwin, Minnesota? And did you know that chickpeas and garbanzo beans come from the same plant?
I thought the largest ball of twine was in Liberal, Kansas. I wonder if they've got that wrong. At any rate, we're thinking about Wikipedia, the internet, and our access to information. Is it too much information? This is Philosophy Talk, and I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. One thing you could say for our old fixed system of categories and well-ordered library bookshelves, that attempt at ordering things represented somebody's best estimation of the proper divisions of human knowledge. But is there any reason to believe that in the brave new digital world, we're destined to organize and categorize the world in better, more realistic, more fruitful ways? Tell us what you think.
The toll-free number is 1-800-525-9917. That number was scientifically selected because it's so much fun to dial. That's 1-800-525-9917. You can email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. Our guest is David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous.
So, David, I want to go back to John's question sort of just before the break. I'll put it slightly differently, right? So I want to ask you about this new way of doing things. Is it just new and not necessarily better? And by better, I mean, let's use a fancy philosophical word, epistemically better. That is, do our new digital categories, which you say turn everything into miscellany, do they really help us to know and represent the world better than we could before? And why do they? Just because we can shift them. So why better and not just different?
Well, generally, yes, it is better epistemically, because we've had to come up with a single order of the universe, a single way of even just ordering books, because that's how atoms work. Everything has to go somewhere. Two things can't go in the same place, so you have to come up with a single order. And yes, we've had thoughtful, knowledgeable experts think this through, and they come up with an order that makes sense. But in the case, say, of the Dewey Decimal System, this thoughtful person was 21 years old, came from a tiny town in New York, went to a tiny Orthodox Christian school, and Dewey Decimal System, if you look at it just as a set of categories, is embarrassing in the modern age. Any taxonomy is any ordering is going to reflect the social biases of the person who does it, and that's fine, because this is additive. It's not that we have to throw out Dewey and take something better. It's that, well, if Dewey works for us, if we need it Dewey now, let's use Dewey. We can have as many different taxonomies and orderings as we want.
I grant. Okay, so look, Dewey came up with this category kind of out of his own skull or something like that, and it wasn't necessarily reflective of the best that is thought and known, as they like to say in the old great books tradition, right? But I don't know, a technology that makes anything goes doesn't seem to me that has any guarantee that is going to make things better. To say that taxonomy should be shiftable and thinkable up on the fly and not fixed and ossified is not to say that just because we shift to a new paradigm that enables us to make things up on the fly, we therefore are going to do something better. What's going to guarantee that we do things better?
So first of all, Dewey, his prejudices actually reflect directly Western philosophical prejudices. So we've got to hang our hat back on that as well. So yes, this is better. It's not only that it helps us to find and navigate this vast sea of information, which would be enough. It's better because it means that the way that we sort and organize the world at the moment is a better reflection of of how the world looks through our interests. It does not mean anything goes. If what matters to me at the moment, because I'm hungry, is edible stuff, and I'm looking around my room for sorting that way, and I pick up either a pen or a poisonous mushroom and misassign it to that category, I've made a mistake. It's not that anything goes. It's rather that knowledge now reflects our interests, and this is far better than saying there's a single way in which knowledge is put together. That's simply false.
So let's dig a little deeper here philosophically. I know you've got that background and
a long time ago.
Yeah, and what you say is very interesting. But conventions, I mean, so the point is that our way of ordering things, the Dewey Decimal System, the Library of Congress, the divisions in the university, the way departments are, those are all largely conventional. They don't just reflect a natural order of things. On the other hand, conventions are very important because they're important in communication. I mean, it may be arbitrary whether we meet for lunch at Spago's or Taco Bell, but once we've decided to do that every week, then we can meet there without thinking about it. So, to what extent? I mean, how do we evaluate the importance of categories for continuing the conversation without ossifying them in a way that's bad?
Categorization is a tool. We use it to do things. So we evaluate it by how well it does what we do. If we take categorization itself as a reflection of the world, then we have no basis. We have bases for saying that this one works or that one doesn't, or this thing goes in here or it doesn't go in there, and the pen is not food. All that remains. It's not anything goes. But we have no basis for saying that this. I'll give you an example. So scientists argue over what is a species and whether you should be looking at the DNA or you should be looking at populations that interact or that the morphology, the shape of the creatures or what. Any one of those can be useful and interesting. No one of them, there's no single thing called a species and that we can say one of those three is absolutely right. These are ways that we slice up the world out of our interests and ideas about the world.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're talking about too much information with David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous. We'd love to have you join this conversation. We got lots of open phone lines. 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917. Or as always, you can email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. David, so there seems to me, this is a philosophy program, and there seems to be a philosophical view underlying your thought, and see if I've got this right. I mean, you might think the world, there are all kinds of things in the world, but the world does not come neatly packaged in a hierarchy of categories. I mean, things just don't fall into some Linnaean hierarchy or some Aristotelian hierarchy of categories. And if we impose such a thing on the world, we're not being true to the world. The world is, it's cross-categorizable in lots of different ways, and an epistemically better, a more respectable way of thinking about the world and cognizing the world is to recognize that fact, and that seems kind of rooted in like pragmatism and postmodernism, and you seem to have an underlying thought along that line. Am I putting thoughts in your mind, or is that really your thought?
That is really my thought. Yeah, it was well put. Ultimately, if you forced me to, I would say I'm a Heideggerian. But what your characterization of this is of what I think is exactly right. I mean, the notion. So let me put it like this: if you believe in sort of an Aristotelian, Linnaean world in which you have a nice hierarchy, and your job is to figure out how things go into it, which basically has been our thinking in the West for 2,500 years. Then what you're actually doing is reducing the amount of information available to you. You're doing the same thing as we do when we take a book and turn it into a catalog card with 3 lines of text on it and a couple of numbers. I mean, that's very, very useful, absolutely useful for physical organization. But you've reduced the amount of information to what fits on the library card, or you've reduced the essence, to use an Aristotelian term, the essence of the object to the fact that it's a feathered, 2-legged thing. So our old way of handling the amount of information that we had was to reduce the amount of information. The new way, when we have so much more, is to blow open those possibilities. So we now have so many ways of organizing and categorizing, which we need and makes our world richer, understanding of the world richer.
Because for everything that there is, we have multiple simultaneous, flexible ways of describing and getting at it. So if you think there's the things and then the ways of getting at it, the ways of categorizing, representing it, we've got so many more ways of representing it, and we choose among the ways of representing in a way that best suits our kind of investigatory interest. I mean, I actually think that's a cool thing. But we have callers on the line. 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917, or email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. And we've got a caller with a great name, Ken in San Rafael. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Ken.
Hi, I've got a two-part question. One is, do the guests, or do you think that the internet body of knowledge will ultimately be able to answer the deepest, most profound questions of human existence, or does it have that capability now and we just don't realize it? And number two, because the internet multiplies by great exponents the amount of contacts and the amount of information about ourselves that we can put out there, does that in and of itself have the ability to increase our lives' value and our communication value? In other words, does the element of chance that the internet kind of blows out there in terms of contacts and communication, by increasing that greatly, is it in fact increasing the value and the opportunities for human beings?
Thanks, Ken. David, what do you want to make of that question? There was a lot there. You make of it what you will.
Yeah, no, I actually think it's a single question in two parts, and I think it's a great question. The way that we slice and dice the world and come up with new ways of putting this together and seeing new relations, we do this. We do this formally at times, and sometimes we do it informally, just through a link, maybe in an email or whatever. But we do it together. We're doing. This is not just an individual, each of us alone facing the vast sea. We are building this stuff, these ways of organizing and thinking about it. We're doing it together, and frequently with something that has a fair bit of persistence or permanence, and that can be reused. So we're constantly adding to the set of ways we can make sense of this. Now, personally, I think that we're not going to answer the most profound questions and so forth, because I think one of the lessons of the internet, but also of all of human history, is we are never going to agree. We're never going to agree on everything. It's just, we have all of human history as evidence of that, and there's no reason, I think, to think that that's going to get significantly better. The contacts that you talk about on the internet, the sociality of it, makes it clearer than ever that a peaceful world is not going to be a world in agreement. It's going to be a world full of noisy disagreement.
So just for the record, I in answer to Ken's question, I Googled the meaning of life, and one of the top entries says, the information you are seeking has been moved. So I think that's a pretty deep and profound answer right there.
We've got another 1-800-525-9917. That's 1-800-525-9917 to join this conversation, or email us at comments@philosophytalk.org. And we have Greg in East Palo Alto on the line. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Greg.
Hello, thank you for answering my call. My question is that I think that there's nothing wrong. What I don't hear said so far is that the vast majority of people can still go along with the conventional classification system, and on top of that, there's a long tail of alternative classifications that can be exploited, even if it's only occasionally by relatively few. That's what electronic information access and storage adds to the conventional classification, which was at least part out of necessity and part out of the demands of the establishment. So that the vast majority of people can retain their use of conventional classifications, but there is the possibility of a long tail of alternatives that can be exploited by some fraction of society. That's one thing I think that it's added by.
Thanks, Greg. That's good. David, what do you think? I mean, it's kind of both and out there, right?
Absolutely. That's absolutely. That's what I meant when I put not clearly enough that this is additive. We get to keep the old ones. If Dewey works for you, fantastic. If Library of Congress, but maybe Amazon's classification, and then the long tail of classification. So absolutely, we get with some persistence and some permanence, an increasing ability that we're doing for one another. So I completely agree.
I've got a couple of emails. Will in San Francisco says, could it be said that the Internet returns us to something akin to natural organization, in which topics and sites form associations based largely on free association? Then, somewhat contrary spirit, Fred in Fresno says, Internet search puts too much emphasis on syntax. When I search for John Perry, I have to go through dozens of John Perry Barlow sites before I get to the one I'm looking for. The Internet is just going to put a lot of importance on having an unusual name. What's your reaction to those two interesting emails?
Well, I have trouble with the notion of a natural organization. It seems to me that organization is something that we see based upon natural attributes that are really there, but that come to the fore because we have an interest in them at the moment, and a history of how we view the world. Because all of this is cultural and social as well, of course. To Fred, sure, search sucks, but search sucks a lot less than it did 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or 2 years ago. So while much of the emphasis is on meaningless syntax or meaningless association of terms, there's actually a lot more we can do with getting the right responses, the intended responses, using the meaningless association of terms. And there's more that we can do to put more semantics into the web. And so the overall point is that we are right now talking about one of the areas of the most rapid innovation in human history, the area of finding and navigating and making sense of by computers a range of information that is by orders of magnitude larger than anybody ever predicted.
You're listening to Philosophy Talk. We're discussing Too Much Information with David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous.
We've been asking whether new technologies like the Internet give us a better grip on reality or loosen our grip on reality. In our next segment, we'll ask whether new sources of informational authority are likely to emerge that will replace the old, or whether the 21st century will just be kind of a wild, wild west of information.
Taming the New Information Frontier, when Philosophy Talk continues.
With too much information in our brains, do we really have a better or a looser grip on reality? I'm John Perry. This is Philosophy Talk, the program that questions everything
except your intelligence. I'm Ken Taylor. Our guest is David Weinberger, author of Everything is Miscellaneous. And we've got a caller on the line, John in Kensington. Welcome to Philosophy Talk. Not John, Josh. Welcome to Philosophy Talk, Josh.
Hi, thanks. My comment is this, and I guess it's also a question. There's some things that seem to be defined such that you really can't combine them as categories. For instance, if you take two categories, one making egg souffles and the other compiling evidence about cosmology, it seems to me that those are mutually exclusive in the way they're defined. And you could say, well, maybe you could say the universe is puffed up like a souffle or something. Or some other analogy, but those are. It seems to me you can't say that those belong in the same category as they stand. The cosmology and egg souffles.
Well,
those are different categories. So my question is this: what point and to what extent do you are you saying the units overlap in these in actual categories? In other words, two categories are opposed to each other. What unit are you saying is really a miscellaneous thing that can be combined with other things?
Josh, that's a good question. But David, I want to suggest something. I think I got this from reading your book. But I can make a category that has Josh's things in it. I'll just say things that interest me now: souffles and the cosmology of the universe. There's a category. How about that?
Yes, no, I agree. And also, you can't make a universe without breaking a few eggs. So,
So what do you think? I mean,
The
is there
point
he seems to be saying the categories that we use should track reality, and if we have these heterogeneous aggregated categories, they're not guaranteed to track reality, so that's bad or something.
Right, and I'm not saying that. So Josh is raises a good thing to help me try to clarify my point, because I'm not saying you can put any two categories together or that you can put anything into any category and not make a mistake. That would be craziness of the sort that Josh is pointing to. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that there are an indefinite number of attributes that one could point to, ways of slicing up the world, things that smell one way or look another or have weight, whatever. There's an indefinite, unlistable number of attributes. Any one of those can turn out at some particular moment to be of use because you're interested in either making eggs or talking about the universe. We can't predict those, but it doesn't mean that any set of categories goes together or that anything can be slotted into anything else. The way that we chop up the universe is not arbitrary. It's based upon interests. And by the way, some of those interests are widespread and predictably important, and so we have systems that we have in place that use those quite reliably. The colors in a crayon box, we have thousands, tens of thousands, millions of different systems like that because they're persistent and useful. But they're not the only ones. There are as many different categories as there are attributes of things.
So we got some interesting email. I'm not sure we're going to get all to all of it. Here's one from Andrew. He says, I think you're missing the primary issue. As a culture, we have come to believe that everyone is entitled to opinion, which in a democracy is true, with all opinions equally true, which is not true, right? The internet has sped up access, but this has increased the need for editors. Wikipedia is too often wrong to be relied on, even for general knowledge. It's the same problem we've always had. There's always been what we call a tabloid journalism. It was often just wrong. We respected people who can find good sources. It is to that search for validity, accepting the social construction of truth, to which we must and most likely will return. Well, it raises a number of issues, but one is with the demise of newspapers and with the demise of, I suppose, print encyclopedias if they can't compete, have we lost something, namely a kind of a pre-digested sense of authority? We know where to look.
What do you think, David?
Well, there's actually, I think, a deep relationship between the use of the categorization of things and the role of authority. And in fact, that's something that I talk about in the book. We haven't talked about that much here, so it's a little hard to get a running start at it. But I am not saying no authority, everybody's view is equal. We instead now have, on the other hand, what we used to have was a single set of authorities that at its very worst was the expression of a dominant set of ideas that were in some ways pretty repugnant to much of the participants in the system. Now at least we have multiple sources of authority, which are frequently more reflective of the needs of the constituency.
David, I think this is a huge big deal. A huge big deal, not just in the internet, in universities, in the publishing industry, in the music industry, because one of the things that these old structures, they delivered goods that were certified, right? Now the new technology kind of breaks that certification, and even reconfigures the goods. Think about, you write about record albums. Why did they sell record albums? Well, because that's the technology they had. They packaged a bunch of songs together in this vinyl thing, and they sold them as a unit. But now with downloading, you can pick from here, pick from there, pick from there, make your own playlist and all that stuff, right? Now, so the principle of selection is given to the individual consumer more, and all these hierarchical structures, right, are disappearing or being threatened, and they're fighting back, the copyright laws and all that stuff. But there was some good in those hierarchical structures because they were perpetuators of authority, epistemic authority somehow. And I'm not sure what exactly and how they're going to be replaced. I think it's an interesting question.
It's a fascinating question. Nobody's sure because we're in the process of doing it. The problem with certification of the old sort is it doesn't scale. It's fine if you're doing a newspaper which has this tiny number of articles. And once a month they talk about Africa in the U.S. If that's what you want, from certification, well, you can still get the newspaper, or you can get the online one, or you can now go to many, many, many other sources of certification. The problem with the old-style certification is it can't keep up. It wasn't telling us enough. The world is way more interesting than the old sources of certification ever let on.
I grant you that.
So the system just breaks.
I grant you that with a passion. But there's also this, all this behavioral economics, evolutionary psychology shows us that human beings in their information-seeking capacities and their information categorizing capacity, we're piss poor at that stuff, right? And so these structures of authority take up the slack for individual foibles of the mind. And I'm not so sure that a bottom-up percolation of this stuff will necessarily give us a better product in the end. I'm just not sure about that.
Let me just interject here. There is a kind of a middle ground here. One thing that you can do with the Internet is access multiple different authorities, multiple different pre-digested things, but pre-digested in different ways. There's an English version of the Pakistani daily, I think it's called The Dawn. You can read that every morning. It's very well written, gives you a much different slice in the world than even something like the New York Times, which as David mentions, is very short on some kinds of news. So there's a middle ground between chaos and accepting the few authorities that we used to have, except access multiple authorities.
What do you think, David?
That's what I've been saying. That's what I'll say again. This is an additive thing. We do not lose the old authorities. We do not lose the old systems of classification. In fact, it's sort of interesting to me why that point, maybe I'm not being clear about it, but it's a point that seems to be to encounter resistance. This is, we get multiple. We don't lose the old. We keep them. We add on to them.
Well, I think the resistance has to do with people can now choose with their feet. Right, and they can walk away from the old authorities and thereby deprive them of the authority that they once had. The institutional structures allow a kind of democracy, and some people see that as a kind of randomness because nothing enforces the old authority.
So the most serious concern that I've heard comes identified with Cass Sunstein frequently. It is a very serious one, which is it's actually worse than the alternative you're laying out, which is that in fact we not only lose the authority, but human beings tend to cluster around the views they already hold and to get hardened in those views. And this is an enormously complex question to try to figure out. But the brief answer for me is, well, that is absolutely a danger, and we have to, because all understanding is the appropriation of the new into the familiar and the old. And so it is incumbent upon us to try to keep that from happening for ourselves and for others.
Got time for one last caller. Dimitri in Berkeley, you're our last caller. Be brief and to the point.
I'd be quick and brief. I want clarification because it seems to me that you're saying that the host is, the guest is saying that we combine these things according to our interests. But I believe he is saying also at the same time that his idea that we can combine in any miscellany in any way we want is actually the truth. So it seems to me he's in the same position as the relativists who are saying, well, there is no real truth. It's contextual or something. There's no real truth except for that.
Dimitri, thanks for the call. David, I'm going to give you one. I think I know what you're going to say to that, but I'll give you one last chance to say that.
Oh, that puts you one up on me. I'm not. I don't think there's a grounds for applying my critique, such as it is, not really mine anyway, but to the notion itself. I'm saying that there are an indefinite number of attributes in the universe. We can sort and order along any of those attributes. We can go right or wrong in doing so. We can pick attributes that don't make sense, or we can put things in the wrong categories. There's lots of ways of going wrong, and there are also some ways of going right. So this is not a relativist position, I don't think.
Right, that's what I thought you were going to say. And, I'd love to have you back sometime to talk about this question of authority and recertifying authority in the bottom up, because I really think that's a complicated question for our age. Unfortunately, we're about out of time. So you have one last thought about that you can leave me with? About this problem of authority?
It is the big problem because in addition to all the ways that we know about newspapers dying and Wikipedia versus Britannica, all of which is important, go down one level at where we just sort and organize and what we say things are. At that most basic level, the question of authority reemerges very strongly, and I'd love to come back and talk with you about it.
Let me end with just one practical question. You're an expert on this. How do you organize your email? When I had Eudora, I had everything in files, and I never got around to filing it. Now I use Gmail, and they say just search. That doesn't work for me either. You must have found the right way to do it.
Yes, my tip is that I completely fail at it.
Oh,
Okay. Well, on that note of epistemic humility, David, I'm going to thank you for joining us. It's been a great conversation. I'd love to have you back sometime.
Anytime. Thank you.
Our guest has been David Weinberger. He's a fellow at the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, author of Everything is Miscellaneous, The Power of the New Digital Disorder. So, John, I love that conversation. What did you think? What did you learn today?
Well, I learned that I want to go read more of this David's books. He's a very intelligent fellow, and he says he's a Heideggerian, so I guess something good comes from Heidegger.
Yeah,
I mean, I have to look into this guy some more. I think it's very interesting. You raised the example of the albums. You used to get albums, so you had, if you wanted something by Metallica, you got, 12 hits or you got 12 songs of Metallica, but they wouldn't all be hits. Probably to get all the songs by Metallica you wanted, assuming you wanted any songs by Metallica, you'd have to buy 2 or 3 albums. Now, so it wasn't just, it wasn't benign categorization. It was manipulative categorization. Now I have my little iTunes, and iTunes has a Genius service, and I can hit on the Genius bar and give them one song, and they'll tell me what would make a nice album to listen to. So it's multiple kinds of expertise, and you can choose one that's not manipulative.
Well, that's certainly true. I mean, that's certainly true. The show we did on the copyright wars. I mean, these old institutional authorities, I mean, they want to fight back. They want to control this stuff. So I think it's a grand thing that in the age of the Internet, there's more democracy. But you know what? This conversation continues, as always, on our blog, the blog.philosophytalk.org, where our motto is Cogito Ergo Blogo. I think they're before our blog. And if you love the Internet age, join our Facebook community, which is burgeoning, and it's really cool. So go check it out.
And if you love the Internet age or don't love the Internet age, you can download podcasts of our program from our website as well. For the final word, we turn to the always over-informative Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Ian Scholes, too much information for the normal Jane and Joe, maybe, but not for governments. That is why the government set up, back in 2002, the Information Awareness Office as part of DARPA, the Defense Department's Research and Development Wing, which gave us the Internet, among other things that if we ever find out about, we would have to be killed. The goal of the Information Awareness Office, or IAO, was to create total information awareness. The IAO had in development face recognition programs, gait recognition programs, that is, recognizing individuals by how they walk, and speech-to-text and translation programs. It also developed something called the Policy Analysis Market, or PAM, a kind of hedge fund that rewarded participants if they accurately predicted geopolitical trends. This was interpreted by critics as a way to profit by betting on assassinations and terrorist acts, a kind of Deadpool for spies. And this led to a congressional audit of the IAO, and amid fears that total information awareness could lead to mass and secret surveillance, the IAO was defunded in 2003. Some of its programs continue, however, such as Genoa 2, now called Topsail, which provides IT tools to preempt terrorist attacks. Now, some paranoid types out there think that Facebook is a front for DARPA and a mutated version of the Information Awareness Office, one in which we basically spy on ourselves. Web 2.0 is all about social networking, in other words, but it's also about providing massive amounts of data for others to mine. Why would people think this? Well, after its launch, Facebook received $12.7 million from a venture capital outfit called Excel Partners. Its manager, James Breyer, has served in another venture capital firm with Gilman Louie, currently CEO of In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital firm. You can check out In-Q-Tel's website yourself, iqt.org. CIA's not hiding anything. And $27.5 million came to Facebook from Greylock Venture Capital. A former Greylock senior partner, Howard Cox, is also on the board of In-Q-Tel. Another figure in In-Q-Tel is Anita K. Jones, who ran DARPA for a while. And have you read the Facebook privacy policy? It includes the following, quote, "We may share account or other information when we believe it is necessary to comply with law. This may include sharing information with other companies, lawyers, agents, or government agencies," unquote. So at some point, theoretically, a Facebook user will ask something or reveal something that the powers that be can neither use or do not want to be known. Perhaps the shadow government is gathering information right now about Facebook users, who they friend, who they poke, who they attack with zombies or pirates, their highest Lexia scores, their favorite dogs, and even what Muppet, Star Wars, or Xena character they most resemble. What the shadow government does with that information, of course, is a mystery. And if you ever solve it, well, again, they'll probably have to kill you. I gotta go.
the wisdom of the ages in a nutshell from Ian Scholes, the 60-second philosopher.
Philosophy Talk is a presentation of Ben Manila Productions and the trustees of Leland Stanford Junior University, copyright 2009.
Our executive producer is David Demarest.
Our production coordinator is Devin Strolovich. Our directors of research are Daniel Elstein and Cole Leahy. Lael Weiss is our webmaster.
Also thanks to Zoe Corneli, Merle Kessler, Corey Goldman, Jennifer Jensen, and Mark Stone.
Support for Philosophy Talk comes from the Templeton Foundation. Also from various groups at Stanford University, the Friends of Philosophy Talk, and the members of KALW San Francisco, where our program originates.
The views expressed or misexpressed in this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of Stanford University or of our other funders.
The conversation continues on our website, philosophytalk.org. I'm John Perry.
And I'm Ken Taylor. Thank you for listening.
And thank you for thinking.